one of the feedback that you gave me is, Bryce, dude, you're so awesome. I freaking love you. But one thing you said is you have a naive heart. And I want to dive into that actually, kind of just like a practical example.
So boys and girls, as you're watching or listening to this, like we did not stage this like this. Like he's literally asking me something that we talked about in private about a week ago.
Yeah.
And so since you're asking me, I'm going to be very direct and forthcoming. And I think that's what you would only expect from me.
Welcome to the Fitness CEO Podcast.
All right, welcome back, friends, to another amazing episode of the Fitness CEO Podcast. Back in the studio, new month with my man B. B, welcome back to the show.
Yet another killer episode. Let's rock and roll.
All right, so today is about knowing your zones of genius, knowing your strengths as an entrepreneur, but also knowing your weaknesses and not really doubling down to get your weaknesses better, realizing that you need to find better people that are better than you in these particular skill sets and bring them on to help support you. So basically, that's the theme of this episode, which is hugely valuable to our audience. So I want to start out just talking a little bit about your strengths, your weaknesses. I'll do the same. We're actually cut from a very similar cloth in terms of strength and weaknesses, but I want to hear from your lens.
Well, I mean, from my lens, before I even jump into it, it's something that now at 48 years old with over 20 years of entrepreneurship under my belt, and I not only am the founder and leader, visionary, whatever, of all these different companies, but I also have equity in so many others, like from the cauliflower crust company that most people have in their fridge and eat, to Fuel Hunt Apparel, to a software company, etc. So I get to see from so many different angles that the person who thinks that they're going to be the jack of all trade becomes the human bottleneck to the growth of that business, right? Because they think that I'm supposed to have all the answers. And I realize over time and maturity as an entrepreneur that actually you're not supposed to have all the answers. You're supposed to surround yourself with people who have the answers.
Yes.
And so, for me specifically, I knew my zone of genius early on was the ability to take a product or service and market it, sell it, and get people excited about it. Because if I believe in something, I can light the world on fire about it because I'm passionate.
How did you know that?
Well, I knew that because instinctively growing up, I've always been very self-aware. And growing up, I always knew that I remember when we came to America, like 3 years into being in America, I saw commercials about Disneyland on TV. My parents couldn't afford Disneyland, but I saw a 30-second commercial and I spent 30 minutes pitching my parents, my brother and sister, everyone, why Disneyland is the place for us to be. And I had figured out it's only like 20 miles from where we live. And then we didn't have the money to go to Disneyland, but guess who was at Disneyland the next weekend? This guy, right? Like my parents found a way, if not to just shut me up, they found a way to take me. So I knew that once I was excited about something, I can transfer those feelings. Like that was the first time I could remember that. The second time I remember that, now at this point, I was maybe 11 years old. I found a box of posters that were thrown away, and they were like AC/DC posters and Metallica posters and like all these rock bands, Van Halen posters. They were thrown away, brand new posters, all rolled up with the plastic sleeve on them. I dug them out of the dumpster because my dad, he had a tailor shop, and so like there was some general store that had shut down, like 10 doors down, and they had tossed them out. I started looking at those posters. I didn't know any of them, but I could tell they're rock bands. They're holding guitars and drumsticks and things like that. So I put 50 cents on a box, put all the posters in, like 50 cents per poster. And man, when people were like, hey, what are you selling? Posters. And I would just open it up and show them like, you like this band, right? This band you really like. And they're like, AC/DC? Yeah, sure. I'm like, great, it's 50 cents. Why don't you buy it? And I only did it so that I could raise enough money so I can go across the parking lot and buy myself a roast beef sandwich from Arby's. Because like I discovered America's magical restaurant called Arby's. And so like to me, I had to sell enough posters to go get myself a roast beef sandwich. So again, mission focused. And so when I realized that my zone of genius is to be able to orate and get excited and influence and persuade others about a thing that I'm excited about. But then as whatever I'm excited about grows, let's use Fit Body Bootcamp as an example. As Fit Body Bootcamp went from 10 locations to 20 to 30, 40, 50, 60, I started to notice that there's not enough systems in place. We need systems. And I'm not the guy to do it. Systems do not excite me. Dan Sullivan has this exercises that he puts people through. He draws 3 circles. And if I remember correctly, circle 1 are like things that just turn you on and make you happy. Circle 2 are things you tolerate. And circle 3 are things that you just hate, despise, and just suck the life force out of you, right? I realized very quickly that creating systems was in circle number 3 for me. Like, I would rather pull my fingernails off each of my fingers than create systems. So I hired people around me who were good at creating systems, but bad at marketing and selling, because I already got that piece covered. Mm-hmm. And so very quickly, using Dan Sullivan's exercise, I realized I got to do as many things as I can in box number 1, circle number 1, because it makes me happy, gets me excited, makes me passionate. I'm in flow state. Yeah, there's some things I got to do that I must tolerate, circle number 2. But right now, if I look at my life, 80% of the things I do are in circle number 1, things I love and excite me. Probably another 10% are in the things that I tolerate, and maybe 10% are in the things that I hate. But hey, guess what? At this level, I'll do it. Yeah. I have a good life. I'm not going to complain about it. But it used to be the other way. Like, as your business grows, we needed systems, processes, organizations, checks and balance, and I was trying to create it, and it was causing problems in my marriage. It was losing sleep over it, and I was like, do I really want to grow this thing any bigger? Because if I do, I only amplify this problem, not realizing that there's people out there that actually take my circle that I hate, and to them, that's the circle that excites them and gives them life.
That's wild realization.
Is that nuts?
That's crazy, because I'm the same way in so many ways.
Yeah.
For me, it's interesting. I've always had this, and I always tell you this, you're one of the most likable guys that I know. I share in the same quality. We're just good with people. We just have this innate people. So that helps with communication, persuasion. For me, I grew late when I was basically young. So when I was 14, 15 years old, I looked like I was 12. But ultimately, I was the captain of my soccer team, high-performing team. I was like 4'11", 5 foot. And I'm just like, yelling at the refs and like working the refs and basically leading my team. And I knew at a young age that basically I can kind of, have influence and people can get behind me and get my vision. So that was something from a self-awareness that you shared. Ultimately, I shared as well. And I learned that at a young age. The second thing, in terms of persuasion and communication, I didn't actually know it until you gave me feedback, but you asked me to speak at one of your fitness business summits. We talked about it in a previous episode. I think this is 2013 or 14. And at the end of the day, I did well. I've certainly developed my communications and presentation skills exponentially more and still have a ways to go, just we all do. But I remember getting off that stage and feeling like really well accomplished. And you came to me afterwards and you're like, Bryce, that was the first time that I knew something was special about you. And it really was basically playing into my zone of genius, playing into something that I like to connect, influence, sell, persuade, etc. So I think, for me, those were some big aha moments. Now, on the flip side, I'm really, before I get there, I want to kind of get your perspective before I kind of share some of my, challenges, if you will, my weaknesses. But one thing we both just said was about being self-aware. What would you say to someone who's watching this that isn't necessarily self-aware, they don't really understand what they have a knack for? How do you develop that?
Yeah, well, I don't know how you would develop that, but I do know the shortcut to getting the result that you want. And that is the Dan Sullivan exercise we just talked about. I suppose the way someone would actually maybe develop self-awareness is through journaling, right? Like when I spend some time every morning and by the way, when I journal, I don't write sentences. I write bullet points, right? Like, how did yesterday go? I'll kind of break down my morning journaling into this. How did yesterday go, right? I'll ask myself that and I'll write bullet points. Hard, frustrating, da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. And I'll look at all those bullet point words and I'm like, okay, now I'll break it down. Well, why was it hard? Why was it frustrating? Why was I annoyed? Oh, I didn't sleep well. Okay, or I dealt with something that's in that hate circle, the circle that I hate, right? I spent 80% of my day on the 10% circle that I hate. Okay, got it. That's a fluke of a day. Move on. Get better rest. Move on. And so journaling helps. So I ask myself, how did yesterday go? How do I want today to go in terms of intentions, setting intentions, right? And then from there, I might say, I want it to be easy. I want it to be hard. I feel like I have a lot of energy. Two simple sentences that I ask myself, I can now write bullet points and then just look at those words and go, what do those words mean? That makes you self-aware. We never analyze our thoughts and feelings and intentions. We just wake up and drink the coffee and do the morning interpretive dance, and then out the door we go. We go from one box to another box to drive, and then we sit in another box, and then we work on a box, and then we get into a box and drive to the other box and then sleep in a box. And no one takes time to actually journal, write down, and explore their feelings and thoughts. Well, so that's how you would develop self-awareness over time. But the hack, the faster way to it, is you go, all right, how do I know if I like something or not? Draw those 3 circles. On above one, you're going to draw a heart. Above one, you're going to draw like a tolerate face, like just a mediocre, like, okay, I can give or take this. And on the other one, you're going to draw like the skull and crossbones. I hate this. And then put a lot of your stuff in the circles, like your daily stuff that you do. Find out what circles they go in, and then assign a percentage to it. And very quickly realize what is in my zone of genius and what is not, right? Like very quickly you realize the things that I hate, are there people that I could either delegate to, or is there a way I can automate this, or could I eliminate it? Now I'm always looking at everything that I touch. If I don't love it, can I delegate, automate, or eliminate? And if I can, I do.
Well, amen to that. From my lens, one thing that's really helped with my self-awareness is actually like proactively asking for feedback. And this is something, we have a culture of feedback at FitBody all the way down to our coaches. We basically have a new coaches onboarding playbook where we take them through a new coach who's not a strong coach, but ultimately has interest in being a fitness coach. And we take them through a 12-week onboarding process where we give them feedback. We get them on game film. We watch them coaching sessions. We give them feedback. They meet with their integrator, their head coach, to basically give them outside eyes. And this is something you've talked about, and I've really learned from you, having outside eyes on that. So for me, it's been really, really important, not only for my organization, for my team, for my coaches, my franchise partners, but also for me as a leader, and is really proactively asking for feedback. And sometimes that can be very uncomfortable. That can be actually painful, but it comes, you have to have emotional resilience, emotional maturity. But I'm actually going to, do a little exercise here. And this is a conversation we just had this past week. So one of the feedback that you gave me is, Bryce, dude, you're so awesome. I freaking love you. You sung all my accolades. But one thing you said is you have a naive heart. And I want to dive into that actually, kind of just like a practical example. One, I want to get your feedback. And two, I think it's just a good practical example to kind of like, practicing what we preach. So I would love to kind of open up that Pandora's box.
Yeah. Well, okay. So you're asking me like, hey, why did I say that?
Yeah. And like, what do you see about me that ultimately I can kind of glean and get better from? And actually, I completely agree with you.
Yeah. Okay. So boys and girls, as you're watching or listening to this, like we did not stage this like this. Like he's literally asking me something that we talked about in private about a week ago.
Yeah.
And so since you're asking me, I'm going to be very direct and forthcoming. And I think that's what you would only expect from me. But I think you've got a naive heart because and this is going to say a lot more about me, you see so much more awesomeness about humanity than I do. Like I also see the dark side of humanity. I think it's factory installed for me. I often talk about on my podcast, the Bedros Keuilian show, that I sometimes most days I wake up angry and bitter and I want to go back to sleep. Like my default, my factory installed state is like angry and bitter,
And I say default rage, and actually I use that as fuel.
Yeah.
Anyways, continue on.
And so to me, I envy you when you seem to always see the best in humanity. You always see the silver lining. You always see the grass is greener. And I'm always like, yeah, it is. But there's also a little rotten area there somewhere that we're just going to have to find it. And I know it's there and I will look for it and I will sniff it out. And if it's not there, I am pleasantly surprised. Right? Whereas you'll be like, dude, I don't see any rotten area, B. We're fine. So I think that's one area we're different. And you are just more optimistic, I think, by nature. And I'm more pessimistic by nature. And humanity is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'm like, oh, man, his heart is so naive. And I want to like open the eyes on his heart and be like, look, the world is not as you see it, Bryce. Not all the time. You know what I mean? Not everyone has the best of intentions for you. Some people might be trying to, sell you a narrative. Some people might be trying to insulate you and isolate you from information that they don't want you to get because you're in a position of power.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
We're in positions of power where people try and change our perspective because others have something to gain. And I'm so aware of that. And so I'm like, I wonder if because he hasn't been in this position for so long, if his heart hasn't crusted over like mine, right? So part of it is I think my heart has crusted over a longer period of time. Yours is still fresh and fluffy and beautiful. So that's why I say you have a naive heart. And it comes from a place like I'm very jealous of that at times, right? Because I certainly have that naive heart. When I see my son and daughter, I still see like so much innocence and beauty in them, even though I know it's probably some level of lying because one's 15, one's 17. I'm sure they're lying to me about something. I'm sure when they say goodnight, they're not going right to bed. They're probably playing a few more hours of video games. In fact, sometimes I hear the clicking of the keys. And so I know there's some video game playing happening. And I hear Chloe on her little headset talking to her friends. that really wasn't a good night, but I still see them as pure and innocent. So I do have that naive piece in me, but I think in the workplace, my opinion is that you have a more naive heart, but I also believe it serves you well sometimes because you're easier to approach and talk to than I am. And I've, which is why I always say, you're a better leader and manager of people in this building than I ever was. And I will go on record and say that into this hot mic.
I love you, B. I appreciate that. And honestly, this is not staged. This is like basically we're talking about, okay, how do you, gain awareness, right? And one of them is actually asking tough questions of people you respect.
Feedback.
And I appreciate that. For me, aside from that, my one of my weaknesses, and actually, let me take a back. I actually completely agree with you. So on the record,
there you go.
I think it's very strong feedback. I also think, though, to your point, it served me well. It's probably benefited me more in the grand scheme of things as a whole.
Yeah.
It's burned me a couple times, and it might do that in the future as well. But at the end of the day, when you look at the aggregate, I actually think it's a positive. But from a weakness perspective, there's two stories for me that come to mind, and one is when I launched my first Fit Body Bootcamp in Yorba Linda, and this is in 2012, and we talk about delegation and basically finding awesome people that are better than you in like certain areas of genius. And for me, I was a young leader. This is my first business, and even my wife, okay, who was so detail oriented, she freaking executes so well. I was afraid to give her our CRM and our point of sale system, basically information, so she could access that. And finally, after being a bottleneck in my own business for 2 weeks, I was like, finally, I gave her the password. And then like a breath of fresh air, the rest is history. She just dominated, build the system out. And I look back in that learning lesson, I was like, I was the bottleneck, my ego, my pride, my like scare. And also too, like I was just scared, like of the unknown, which I think is just part of the entrepreneur journey. So for me, that was a big aha that I need to start delegating. And I realized I don't have to be good at everything. I just need to be good at the things that move the needle and my zones of genius, and then find other people that are better than me. So that was one big aha. And then the second one, I remember first kind of looking at spreadsheets and data, which we have a scorecard that we teach our franchise partners. And, similar to you, like I'm not a really analytical, like data-driven guy. I'm a salesman. I'm an influencer. I'm a marketer, right? I like people. I like, getting people behind the vision, leading people to greener pastures. I need people. And I'm looking at Lauren in the studio, who's high owl or conscientious in the DISC profile, who likes looking at data, who likes looking at numbers. And I remember first looking at the scorecard, like literally like with a bunch of data, good data, like my revenue in terms of leads and all that, but still from like a granular level, realizing, holy shit, my head hurts right now. Now, it's important. I still need to basically track that, but the running joke at HQ is I stack myself with owls, and owl on the DISC profile stands for C, which is conscientious. And typically people who are conscientious are engineers, okay? They're very data analytical driven. And I stack myself with owls because those are that skill set I'm not, naturally gravitated to, but it's really important for the business. So again, playing in my zones of genius and then basically delegating the rest is really a big aha moment that I wanted to articulate.
Well, and to that point, let's use someone that we all know of, Elon Musk.
Oh, yeah.
Like the dude has SpaceX, he's got Tesla, he's got Neuralink, he's got the Boring Company, he now has Twitter. He's certainly not the CEO and integrator and operator on all of those. He's the visionary, but he stacked himself with the people that he knows have the superpowers that he lacks in.
Totally.
And I think the moment an entrepreneur realizes that, that's when they really like turn on the turbochargers for their business. Because up until that point, you're like, well, I need to run it all. No one can do it like me. Like if I give the password away to this CRM, they could just hit delete, or the bank account can empty, or as it turns out, Tatiana did a better job.
Oh my
right?
goodness, yeah.
Well, I felt the same thing. Like when you became CEO of Fit Body Bootcamp, I'm like, yeah, but I'm the founder. Like I know what's under the hood, and I like every piece I plugged in and da. Well, Bryce, no. And it's just like, oh, dude, he's actually doing it better than me. Well, what do you know? And I just have to meet with you once a month now? Like, what an absolute freedom it's been. But in the back of our mind, we always worry that no one can do it as good as me. Mm-hmm. When in reality, when we have that mindset as an entrepreneur, not only are we, I guess, hamstringing our business, creating a bottleneck, kind of neutering its growth, we're also doing something very important that we don't talk about much on this show, which is we're taking away from our family. Because if I have to try and figure out everything in this company, I have to take more time away. If I have to figure out processes, which I'm not good at, it's going to take me more time to figure out a process. So I'm going to spend more time here at headquarters. That's less time with my wife, Diana, less time with Chloe, my daughter, less time with Andrew, less memories, less experiences, right? Whereas if I could bring people around who have their own superpowers and their own zone of genius, and they could do that in a fraction of the time that I could, I just bought back more time as an entrepreneur to not only work on my zone of genius, but then to go and spend time, good quality time. Because how often as entrepreneurs, we have to talk about this. If you're trying to do it all, you are literally left with crumbs at the end of the day for your family. You're impatient, you're frustrated, your kids come running up to you and you snap at them. It doesn't have to be that way. Like the 1.0 version of me was that. The 2.0 version is, hey, now I get to go play ping pong with Andrew and then one wheel, and then we go to the gym and lift, and then me and Chloe go on dates. And like, what an awesome thing, because I've got the bandwidth. Before I was so frustrated, it's like, just let me sit down and relax for a minute, when they would want to spend time with me. And so it is really vital to understand that when you can learn to delegate, eliminate, or automate as an entrepreneur and only work in your zone of genius, not only does your business win, but your family wins.
Ooh, amen to that, B. That's incredible. Not only the framework, but also, too, the bigger vision and the biggest value to an entrepreneur. Hey there, my name is Bryce Henson, CEO of Fit Body Bootcamp, and you might know me as the host of this podcast, but what you might not know is that I started my fitness business journey as a Fit Body location owner. And since 2012, I've been able to impact my community while creating financial freedom, both for myself and my family too. You see, by using Fit Body's proven business model, we give you all the support and guidance you need to be your own boss and build a business that aligns with your passion for fitness. And being we are the absolute best at launching and scaling our franchise partners gyms, we are now excited to announce our 100 member guarantee. Now you might be thinking, Bryce, what is that? Well, we are so confident that we'll launch your Fit Body Bootcamp location with well over 100 paying members from day one on your grand opening, that if we don't, we'll run your marketing till we do. That's how confident we are in our ability to support you and guide you through this process. So if you're interested in creating more income through impact, click the link somewhere around this video to apply. I want to actually ask you a question, and I'm teeing this up because I've heard this a handful of times, and it actually this story made a big impact for me in terms of my delegation journey. It was one of the first delegation stories that you learned about a sprinkler and about your zone of genius and a system. Yeah. So our audience needs to hear this because they need to really understand the value of delegation and staying in your lane.
Yeah. So many, many years ago, friends, well before Fit Body Bootcamp was ever a thing, and I was coaching and consulting gym owners. And at the time, because I had 5 successful gyms that I had built and sold, and so word got out that Bedros is good with opening and scaling gyms. And so other gym owners started to reach out, and they were like, hey, would you coach me on how to make a successful gym? And I was like, yeah, sure. And so I would charge like $2,500 for 6 months of coaching. I was just getting on the phone with them once a month and going through their marketing, their sales, their deliverables, referral generation, retention, just systems, operations, processes. And then they would do better in business. And then, but one day I'd sent out an email to my email list saying, hey, I can take on 2 more coaching clients. If you're interested, call me at this number. And I only had one employee at the time, my assistant, Amanda, worked out of our spare bedroom that we had, me and my wife had. That number came to a separate phone line that was in that room. And I sent out the email broadcast to like 1,400 gym owners saying, I can take on 2 clients. If you're interested, call me at this number. Let's talk. Well, just then, as the email goes out, my wife comes up the stairs and she goes, hey, there's a sprinkler that's busted and it's shooting up like a fountain. Now, I'm a pretty handy guy. And so I was like, oh, no worries. Turn off the sprinkler from the unit, and then I will come and fix that. I knew it would take me like 10 minutes. And so I got the little pipe cutters. I got the extra pipe that I need. I got the two joints that I needed. And I started digging with the little hand shovel, and I found that. And I've got mud on me, and I've got like this pipe glue on my fingers. And just then Amanda comes outside and she goes, hey, somebody called. They're asking questions about your coaching program. $2,500 opportunity here. I'm like, I'm looking at my arms. I'm like, hey, listen, you've heard me do the sales presentation many a times. You got this, Amanda. So here's what I did wrong. I took Amanda out of her zone of genius. She was my owl. She was the person organizing systems and processes in my calendar, my coaching calendar. And I put her out of her zone of genius into her zone of incompetency. Mm-hmm. And I asked her to do sales. Bless her little heart. She did the best she could, but she lost the sale, $2,500. That $2,500 to me would have it would be the equivalent of today for me, it would be the equivalent to $400,000 sale. Right? That's how desperate we were for that money, me and my wife. So Amanda comes down. She goes, I was like, hey, what happened? Did you close the deal? She goes, well, they said they're going to think about it. I was like, oh, crap. We all know what think about it means. They're not buying. They're gone.
See you laters. Don't see you later.
And I realized in that moment, I took myself out of my zone of genius, which is to be on the phone, doing the sales presentation, and then gaining that coaching client, and then changing and transforming their business. Yet I found myself doing a $25 an hour job, fixing a sprinkler pipe when I could have just paid my lawn guy to do that, right? So I stepped out of my zone of genius. I put her out of her zone of genius. We both worked in our zone of incompetency, and I lost $2,500 just so I could fix a sprinkler pipe. And that was the most expensive lesson till this day that I've learned. And we've lost and gained millions of dollars in this building, making decisions on things. That was the most expensive because that was going to pay the mortgage for next month. That's how tight our budget was. And so I'm telling everybody right now, being able to stay in your zone of genius and delegate the things that don't matter to others. I should have been hey, Mr. Plumber, you fix that. Hey, Amanda, your job is just to set up calls for me to get on the call and close them and then schedule them in my appointment book. But I just ended up stirring the pot, and I'll never make that mistake again.
Ooh. Appreciate that, B. Lots of value there. Dude, from my end to kind of put a bow from my perspective, and I want you to take us out today with a final parting words and lesson. But really, it's about self-awareness. It's about personal growth. It's about knowing your zones of genius and then finding other people that are smarter than you, that are more capable than you in these other areas that are important, that are things that need to get done in your business, but they don't need to get done by you. And if you do that, you're going to set yourself up to be a strong entrepreneur, to create a thriving business so you have more income through impact, which is really the name of the game. So that's my takeaway today. Yeah. B, final words and take us home.
Yeah. So guys, the big message I want to send to you here is that entrepreneurship truly is the highest form of self-development. It tests your ability to take risks. It tests your ability for patience, for frustration. It tests your ability to communicate, to be a better visionary. Entrepreneurship is the highest form of self-development. But as an entrepreneur, you cannot be an island, because when you are, there is no one lone wolf. We are tribal, we are community-based, and so you need your community of team members. You need people that have very unique, special zones of geniuses that you can bring on board, delegate so that you can stay in your lane, they'll operate in their lane, and the entire business moves forward, and we all develop together. And so I think the greatest gift I can give you as we part ways on this episode is to understand the highest form of entrepreneurship, or highest form of self-development, is entrepreneurship. And you are not made to be a lone wolf or an island. You are made to work as a tribe, as a team, as a community. And when you delegate, we all win together. So thank you so much for watching this episode with us. And of course, if you like this episode, take a screenshot, share it on social media, tag myself, tag Bryce, tag the Fitness CEO podcast. And of course, please leave us a positive review across all the platforms, and we'd appreciate it. Talk soon.